Jon Kilmer, welcome to R4E, and I appreciate you joining today.
Good to be here, man. I'm psyched.
I am too, and we were just talking about your favorite walkout song before we started filming here, "Ain't Giving Up My Truck" by Riff Raff. I know you said it gets the people going for you, but why is that your walk-up song?
Man, it's well, first of all, I have a little fun story, a little history of Riff Raff that man, probably from like 10 years ago, but that aside, that opened the Riff Raff door for me. But that aside, when I heard news that Riff Raff was going to be making country music, I had to tap in, and the first song he hit the world with was "Ain't Giving Up My Truck," and it did not disappoint. It's the most American song I've ever heard. It's like it's like modern day Nickelback. I don't know how else to describe it.
I love it. I love it, and I love the Morning Power Hour. We can dive into that in a second, but before we do, you mentioned country music, so maybe that's a good, quick, natural segue into where you are now. If I remember correctly, you're in Nashville, if that's right.
Nash Vegas, baby.
Okay, fantastic. And you grew up in the Massachusetts area, if I did my homework correctly.
Yep. I grew up about 10 minutes south of Boston.
Fantastic. Well, I want to dive into your kind of crazy life trajectory, and maybe we start back with growing up in I guess 10 minutes outside of Boston. Walk me maybe from childhood up to when you graduated school, and we can kind of figure out where to go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Let's start at my birth. How about that? Let's start.
What do you remember now?
1988. No. Yeah. I mean, growing up outside of Boston was cool. I guess I can start at right around like the impressionable ages of like 13, 14 years old.
Let's hit it.
Kind of like right where I started to develop the passion of the stuff I'm doing today, which I'm lucky enough to say that it started at a very young age. And, when you're that young, there's no like real set goal on where it's going to lead. You just kind of have that ignorance is bliss type of thing of just falling in love with what you're doing. And for me, it started with music and film, and I can honestly say it started right around 13 or 14 years old for both of those career paths, because I got my first camera when I was 13, and I remember just shooting videos with my friends and starting to edit for the very first time soon after that. And with music, it was the guitar for me, just learning to play guitar and then learning to record myself soon after that. So started at a very young age, and I was very blessed to go to a school, which was very rare back then, because I'm a dinosaur. But back then, before technology was very, I don't know, technology in film and music wasn't that progressed yet. Let's just say that. And I was very blessed to go to a school where they offered both music classes and video classes at a high school. So I was very blessed to do that, and that kind of reassured me that those things that I fell in love with, it just reconfirmed that I was good at them, I guess, because it started to become a part of my it kind of like bled into my like high school life, if that made sense, where I was getting a lot of reassurance that I was good at these things, because then my peers started seeing me making videos and started seeing me playing guitar and performing and stuff like that. And it kind of made me like stand out in a way, because I was just the guy that was really into all that creative stuff, and I was kind of gung-ho about it. And these days you see a lot more of it. You can go on TikTok and find 200, 300 kids that are 14 years old and crushing it in those fields. But back then, it just wasn't all you really had was what was right in front of you and your peers and your community. And I was just kind of that guy in my high school. And as I got older, I majored in film in college, and I still kept music production in my back pocket. So when I went to Hofstra University right in Long Island, I was majoring and focusing on film, but I was still the guy that had like the recording equipment in his dorm room or in the fraternity house. And I kept doing both avenues and just kind of going after both music and film without any real thought as to where it was going to lead. Just, I knew I loved doing both. And then, by the time I got out of college, I just decided to work for myself and kind of set up shop in New York City and just freelance full time.
I love it. Let me pause you there. So you figured out at a pretty young age kind of what, not necessarily what your calling is, but you found out you love the production side of it, from the videography side as well as from the music side. Are your parents creative? Do they come from that sort of creative realm, or Was that
No,
something that didn't come for
I'm the
you?
black sheep of my family 100%. Both well, my brother works in finance. He's a stock analyst, and then my dad was a consultant for like a big tech company, and then my mother was more in like the real estate world, and she's like super super Italian, and like the Italian immigrants that came to America on my side of the family, they purchased like properties like, long, long time ago around the Boston area. And it was kind of a family business. And my mom and her sister still run it to this day. So nothing really in the creative world. And I was just kind of, yeah, like I said, the black sheep of the family.
Got it. And so you picked film as a major. At that time, did you know you wanted to stay kind of the freelance route after graduation, or were you thinking, hey, this is gonna be a nice hobby, and then I'm gonna go the consulting route or the finance route or what have you?
No, I knew I was always going to work in a creative field because I I just knew I wanted to do what I was passionate about. And by the time I graduated college, I mean, I had so much reassurance that I could actually do it because I started to see some success in both music and video in my final year or two of college, just based off of some of the people I was already starting to work with. And, not necessarily giving me a ton of notoriety, but enough legitimacy where I could reach out to people and they would have, heard of the people I've worked with already. So I knew that I had a fighting chance, leaving college. And I had some internships to gain, a little more experience in my fields. But outside of that, I was just grinding day in and day out, selling beats and shooting videos and doing recording time for people for very, very low cost, just trying to make rent every single month. And the first year and a half was definitely a big, big grind, but it was a good learning experience being in New York City and, trying to grind it out, because if I didn't have that starting out, I mean, I don't know where I'd be today.
And it was definitely, I mean, it's definitely a saturated space. How do you think, or was there a particular maybe client you got on early on, or was it just
The
kind of like the
thing,
combination?
it wasn't a it wasn't a saturated space back then. I graduated college in 2010,
Okay.
and especially in the music video space, which is kind of where I caught my first wave, was there was not a lot of videographers shooting kind of like those like low to mid budget music videos back in 2010, 2011. It just wasn't, the technology wasn't really there yet. Um, for those camera people out there, like the DSLR cameras that shot video just weren't, they were just starting to become available in like 2010.
Mm.
And I just happened to have one of those cameras when I was graduating college. And I originally had it for photography. I didn't even know it shot video, but those were the cameras that like, Mac Miller's guy, Rex Arrow, who I based a lot of my work off of. He was shooting on those cameras. And I was like, oh, all right, like these cameras are relatively low cost and you can get this really amazing product. You can get videos that look like Mac Miller's videos. I mean, a lot more people are going to want a product like this. And there weren't a lot of videographers offering that style of video just because the technology was so new. So I guess in a way I got not really lucky, but kind of lucky of the timing of when I entered this field. Because if it was today, you're absolutely right. Like everyone's a videographer. Your iPhone, can shoot 4K and it can look incredible. So there's a lot less need for videography in a way, because a lot of people can do it themselves now. Whereas back then, 10, 12 years ago, there was a big need for especially musicians to have a knowledgeable videographer that could produce high quality content. Because I mean, YouTube was really important back then for musicians. That's how you found out about a lot of musicians, was from YouTube. So video content was definitely in demand, but there weren't a lot of people like me kind of entering the market as a creator.
Right. And you mentioned Rex. I mean, putting you back to that time frame in 2010, 2011-ish, did you have like a community that you were able to kind of latch onto in this freelance creative space in New York? Obviously, it's a area that there's just a lot of creatives in general, but was it ever isolating for you being kind of you didn't go the traditional consulting route, like I mentioned, or the finance route, like your
Mhm.
brother? Did you ever feel kind of on an island while you're doing this other thing, trying to prove yourself, or what was your headspace like at that time?
I felt isolated in like my immediate environment, in the sense that when I moved to New York City, I moved there with my best friend, who I had known since I was, in seventh or eighth grade. And he was working for Bloomberg. So he was working in finance. And every morning he'd wake up at 6 a.m. and put his suit on and ship off. And I'd wake up several hours later and just work on music and try to find leads every day on, who I can work with and how I can generate an income doing what I'm doing. So in that sense, it was pretty isolating because I was kind of alone in an apartment all day, just trying to work on my creative craft and figure out how to make a living out of it. Um, but at the same time, I got to give all the credit to my family because they couldn't have been more supportive. Whereas in a lot of situations, kids who want to do something different than their family, and maybe necessarily the family doesn't understand what their child's doing, they're not always as supportive. Whereas mine, they would have done anything for me to help me along and make sure I was doing what I loved every day. So I got to give all the credit to both my parents and my older brother, who's very music savvy. And although he works in finance, is like a very um he has very amazing taste in music. So he was very supportive as well, as an older brother, as I came up in that field as well. So yes, it did feel a little isolating physically where I was, but at the same time, I couldn't have had a better support system.
That's awesome. And so you made ends meet after that. What was it, year and a half in New York? Was there a particular like big break that you got? You were able to get out of there. What was the kind of next step in your adult life like after that?
Like a lot of people would assume it would be meeting Mike, and then it just kind of took off from there. And in a sense, that's kind of true. But when I met Mike, he only had 2 songs out, and he wasn't necessarily a very well-known artist. And it would have been like another 6 to 12 months before he would have really started to see some success, for like doing his own shows and putting his first album out and really starting to garner like a true fan base. So starting to work with him in 2011, that was obviously, as a milestone I'll never forget, because it led to where I am now. And, I'll always be super appreciative of that moment. But again, it was kind of like that divine timing of just like the demand for video content and the type of videos that I was starting to produce. And um and then yeah, I got to give credit to the blog era too, the music blog era of kind of how I was discovering music back then was through these music blogs like Good Music All Day and Fresh New Tracks. And me developing relationships with those blogs was super important, because once I started to produce these music videos for up and coming musicians, they were getting featured on these blogs, and my logo was getting plastered everywhere. And it was kind of like a big marketing tool for me, where kids from all over the country now were trying to figure out who is doing all of these kids' videos that are on this blog that everyone follows in this underground kind of hip hop world. So man, it was just like it was a giant collection of things where all of these things started to fall into place, and there was a high demand for these style of music videos, and there weren't a lot of guys doing them. And I started working with guys like Mike, who was starting to really pick up steam, and uh, his videos were starting to get plastered all over the internet and all over these music blogs. So right around 2012, there was just this like huge demand, where like this frat rap era was like everyone wanted to be like Mac Miller.
Right.
And if you couldn't get Mac Miller's video guy, which was probably damn near impossible, they'd come to me. and there was a point where I wasn't just doing jobs in the New York City tri-state area. I was getting flown out all these different places, and it wasn't as glamorous as it sounds. Like I wasn't making, a ton of money. I didn't get rich doing it, but I was making a living actually doing what I loved, and shooting music videos and meeting artists and kind of just being a part of this music community, and kind of just being the visual guy behind it all. And yeah, by 2012, 2013, I was shooting music videos for full time, and I was starting to tour with Mike full time and doing all his music videos. And it was kind of like a really beautiful time. So I was very lucky in the sense where it wasn't years and years and years of, grinding and trying to make ends meet. It was really just like a year or two of kind of getting in my groove, and a lot of things falling into place out of my control, just the universe kind of conspiring to make things happen for me.
The universe always conspiring for us.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just crazy to hear. I mean, to your point, all the dominoes that had to fall in the right direction for you to get to where you are. And thinking back to where you kind of were as someone in your young 20s, mid 20s at that time, was there a particular video you shot or instance where you were able to have that kind of out of body or kind of moment of presence, saying like, holy cow, like this is what I've been yearning for since I was 13 and got my first video camera?
Man, I don't know if there's any one particular video, but um my first my first music video I think I ever shot ever was I think it was for this rapper named Tayeb Ali, who I worked with when I was still in college, probably still a senior in college. And he had heard of me because I started my career working with this rapper named Chris Webby, who I went to college with. He was kind of like the first artist I had ever worked with, and he became kind of a notable rapper as well at the time. So, but when I shot this video for Tayeb, I was shooting on like this like not great cameras before I got like a nicer camera. And I remember it was like the first video I kind of really made and put out there and put on YouTube, and it started to actually get on these music blogs, and people were like commenting on it saying like that they liked it. So that was like that was definitely like a opening door like moment where I knew that like okay, like this was my first video. It's already getting a lot of views. I think got like 100,000 views, and I thought I was like the most famous person ever. I'm like, holy shit, I'm so famous. Um, and then from there, I got a nicer camera, and as I went forward, there were some pretty like great monumental videos that I did with Mike throughout the years. There was one called Happy Ending that was kind of like a very, very serious tone, given like the idiots we were back then. Mike was still making some very inspirational videos back then and songs. So there was one called Happy Endings, which I remember we made, and we were like, wow, this is something really special. And then when we all moved to LA together right around 2015, 2016, we shot this video called Brightside, which there's a lot of fun stories behind it. But that final product I look at and I'm like, wow, like I'm really good at my craft. Like this is something I'm really proud of. And I can't believe I actually produced something like this. So I could go on, and I've probably shot over 300 music videos in my career. And I'm sure there's a boatload of them that had a lot of significance to them, but those are just some that pop in my head.
Absolutely. And I know you see what would you, if someone asked you on the street, hey John, what do you do for a living? What would be your one liner for them?
It's such a hard, it's such a hard thing to answer. And I usually just say very simply, I'm either a media producer or a music, film, and podcast producer. And I know that's a very limited response, but I really don't have the time to sit and tell people. Or I'm sure people don't even want to hear it, but it's I could write like a 1,000-word essay on everything that I'm currently doing, and it's so widespread to cast such a wide net. So it's definitely a hard thing to answer.
No, and that's why I bring it up, because it's funny. If you were born 10 years later, you probably would instantly say content creator. That's what you're doing at the end of the day, and you're helping folks produce that content as well. And so to that end, I mean, you now have the morning show, you have YNK, you're still probably have a handful of other endeavors you're diving into right now. Maybe we start with YNK and that whole experience you've had there, interviewing some of the most famous people in the world and being behind the production of all of that. What was that experience like for you? Obviously, it kind of transcended through the pandemic as well, and that probably helped give it some wheels. But what's that process been like for you, and from kind of start to now?
I talked about this on a recent YNK podcast, and I want to start by saying that there's a misconception that when people think of what like someone's come up looks like throughout their career, like they think that it looks like this. It's just like one steady line going up. And that's so not the case. And me having just been in this field for 12 years, like for me, it has not been a steady up. And if you ask Mike, he'll tell you the same thing. Like it hasn't been this. It's been kind of like this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And so it kind of comes in waves, and it's not, you might see some initial success in something, but then there will be a year, maybe 2 years, where you actually start to see things going down and not going up. And you have to kind of reassess and adapt and think, well, how can I do things differently to take things to the next level? And prior to us starting the YNK podcast, there was a year or two where I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing in my career whatsoever. And in fact, there was like a lull of over a year where I was kind of lost. Music videos were becoming less and less important. And Mike was rebranding from Mike Stud to Mike. So he wasn't doing a lot of concerts. He was kind of just figuring out his new sound and working on music. We didn't have the podcast yet. We didn't have our Only Steve subscription model yet. And I was kind of sitting around thinking like, what the fuck should I be doing? It's like, at this time I was living with Mike and the guys in LA, and I just like, I didn't find much sense of purpose in my life for a very long time. And which was kind of daunting and humbling because we had seen so much success leading up to, 2017. We found 6+ years of just nonstop success leading up to that moment, where we had a TV show. Even we had just finished shooting our own, like we had a television vision show picked up that I co-created and co-produced and starred in, and that was probably my largest accolade up until that point in 2016. And then, a year goes by and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing with my life right after that. So just like a huge peak and valley where, out of that time, things like the podcast came to be, like around 2019. And at that point, I had never found more of a sense of purpose, because when you think about producing a podcast, there's a audio element and a video element. And when I take you back to the beginning of this podcast, when I'm telling you about finding my first passions when I'm 13, 14 years old, it was this passion for audio and music and this passion for video. And when podcasting started to become popular and we started doing YNK podcasts, it's like, well, I can literally produce this entire show myself because I've been learning audio and I've been learning video for the past 15 years. I have 15 years experience in both of these fields, and Mike doesn't have to hire 3 guys to produce this high quality podcast. He can just rely on me, and I can not only do it all myself, but I can be on the show and co-host it while I'm producing it, because I have all this specialized knowledge in producing audio and editing audio and shooting video and editing video, that I can just do it kind of all myself. And I found so much pride in that. And I just wish I wish I could go back 2 years from 2019 to 2017 and just tell myself, like, be patient, man. Something's going to present itself and it's going to be huge. And I'm, just, I couldn't be more proud of, not really proud, but more grateful of the podcast kind of presenting itself in the way it did, because man, it just gave me such a sense of purpose when we started doing that. And even to this day, 3-4 years later, we're still doing it. We're 120 episodes deep, maybe more. And that whole journey of getting to produce that podcast and all the people I met and all the people we've interviewed, I can sit here and say I produced an interview for Larry King, which is like insane. It's insane to, like, if I told myself that 10 years ago, like, hey, you're gonna produce an interview for like one of like the biggest media personalities of all time, I'll be like, shut the fuck up, no way. So I just the podcast means a lot to me, way more than what people see on the surface level, just because of how it kind of got to that point and how we started doing it.
Yeah. And I think to your point, the Larry King episode is just it's, again, it kind of is cross-generational. Everybody knows who Larry King is, more so than maybe some of the other guests. But maybe outside of Larry King, is there a particular interview for better or for worse that stands out kind of more to you, whether it be crazy conditions that you're filming in or the actual narrative going on during the discussion, or anything that stands out in your head besides Larry King?
Yeah, there's 2. One was, it was an earlier episode. One of our first ones actually was for this football player, James Conner, who was at the time a running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I won't get too much into his story, but just one of the most inspiring stories I've literally ever heard in my entire life. And if you don't know about James Conner or kind of his trajectory as an athlete, please just look it up. And I'm sure there's plenty of stuff. I mean, if you have time, watch the YNK podcast interview of him, because it's not produced too well. It's one of our first episodes, so give me a break on that one. But it was the story was just so fascinating, and really, like, someone who's literally overcome the biggest obstacles I've ever heard in my entire life, and to get to where he is today was one of the most inspiring things I've ever heard. And it's one thing to actually sit and watch the episode, but to like set the cameras up and sit there and watch the interview happen in real time was just something else. And I strongly urge anyone to check out James Conner's story if you don't know about it. And then the second one, from a production standpoint, the one we did with Baker Mayfield was just incredible. And I'm really, really proud of that one for several reasons. Got to give Mike his roses, because Mike is just such like a respected person, not just in music, but just as a human being. And Baker Mayfield, leaving the Browns at the time he did, he wouldn't talk to anyone in media other than Mike. And just, he didn't talk to ESPN. He didn't talk to any major sports news outlet, but he was comfortable coming over to our house, on Lake Travis in Austin and just sitting on the couch and talking to us and letting us put that episode up and just putting his faith in us. That was just such a cool moment. And then from a production standpoint, I mean, that episode, I remember there being like 3 camera setups and like 4 microphone setups. And I was co-hosting it and just producing it all pretty much by myself. And like that, I was a wreck. I was a wreck that episode because there was just not that anything went wrong, but like, there's these little things happening that I'm trying to monitor the cameras and making sure. I know it's like the biggest interview like we had ever done to date. And it was going to be huge because I knew it was just going to break in news the next day because everyone was trying to get a comment from Baker on, what was happening with him and the Browns. So like I really was like, I can't fuck this up. Like, God forbid a camera battery dies or this and that. And I think all in all, it came out really well, but I was a nervous wreck while it was happening. But after the fact, I was just super proud that I was able to pull a production like that off kind of, just as like a one-man team for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess to comment on the James Conner episode was fantastic and his story is unbelievable. So second that, I'll be sure to plug that episode in the show notes because it really was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Baker episode, I mean, that ended up on Sports Center and just about every other major
everything. Like that was a surreal moment because the thing that made that surreal and the funniest it could have been is our dog Steve, who was sitting next to, I think he was sitting next to Baker the entire episode, and it was just so weird and surreal seeing like our Australian Shepherd, who's like kind of fat, like laying on his back and like falling asleep and like sitting next to Baker and just being plastered all over Sports Center the next day, just being like, my dog's on fucking Sports Center. That's incredible. And not to mention, obviously, like just being like super proud of producing a piece of content that got like literal like national recognition and like things that I'm shooting is like ending up on national TV. That was incredibly humbling as well. And just super proud of our entire team for pulling that off.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. And after something like that happens, does that get into your psyche at all as you're getting into filming other episodes? Like, hey, in the back of your head, are you thinking, hey, I got to make sure this is really buttoned up because you don't know where this is going to end up, whether it be Sports Center or any other outlet or going viral some other way? Is that in the back of your head still as you're filming episodes after that?
No, honestly, like I don't care if one person sees it or a million people sees it. It's kind of just on me where if it's not done properly, it's going to bother me. And it's just that it's a level of perfectionism that I just kind of have ingrained in me where I just like I feel like I genuinely feel badly if I don't like do something to the highest of my potential. So and Mike's the same way. Mike's like such a great guy at holding people accountable for doing their best work. And I wasn't always that way. I think probably he kind of ingrained that in me over the years because he's a very much a perfectionist. So I just no matter what, I just want to make sure it's always the best it can be, no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I mean, each episode's been fantastic, and I didn't plug in until a little bit later on. I guess probably 20 or 21. So it was the gift that keeps on giving, where I'm still able to find random episodes that I haven't listened to. So just keep doing what you're doing there. And then I guess as a segue there, because we haven't talked about that much, is the Morning Power Hour and how that came to be. So I remember I was moving apartments at that time. It was probably March of 2022. You guys launched that, is that right?
Yeah, and when you say you guys, I mean the Morning Power Hour is just me. That's just my show. It's just
That's right. Yeah.
It's kind of like a solo passion project.
Yeah. What was that? What was the impetus for getting that started? And I mean, it's very entertaining, very unique, and I haven't seen anyone else really put something together like you have there. So we'd love to maybe give you the opportunity to share with folks kind of what it is, why you started it, and a little bit more about the program.
Sure. So the Morning Power Hour kind of started with an idea of again benefits to working with Mike as he kind of gets early access to a lot of really cool things. And one of them being Spotify reached out and they were kind of promoting this new format that they were trying to push where you could embed Spotify songs right into your podcast. And you could have access to the entire Spotify library and just plug songs right into your show. So originally they wanted to pitch that to Mike, and Mike already had the Y&K podcast and he wasn't really interested in doing another show with a different format. So I kind of sat on it for a few months and it just kept kind of resonating with me about like this, there's something with that format that could be really beneficial and really cool. And what I came up with was kind of a music discovery show that features up and coming artists, because the way it works is that, say you have a podcast, and within that podcast you can put songs, one song 2 minutes in, one song 10 minutes in, one song 17 minutes in. We're to the point where you can literally start programming your own like radio style music and talk show, the same way like a radio show would be, but you can program it right on your laptop through I think it was through Anchor at the time, which now is bought by Spotify. But you could go right on Anchor and just program your own radio show basically, and plug in any songs you want. So I thought, man, like what a beneficial way to put people onto like music discovery, in a sense where it's so much more beneficial than just having a playlist, just catering a playlist. Because I talked about this recently on the Power Hour, where artists really aren't really given like a narrative anymore. When you're discovering new music and you're kind of going through your release radar or however you discover music on Spotify, yeah, you're finding songs and it opens the doors to finding so many new musicians, but it's not giving you any narrative as to like who these artists are. And people aren't really taking the time to like go down to their bios or like Googling these artists and like saying, oh, I like this artist, let me find out everything there is to know about him, or just figure out what type of guy this is or what he's done or where he's from or anything. So I thought like, what a cool way to like create this type of radio style show that features up and coming artists, that I can kind of curate this music of up and coming artists that I find that have a lot of potential, that I think more people should listen to, and not just play their songs, but then give the backstory on who these people are. And then beyond that, have these artists on the show and actually interview them and kind of let them kind of sell themselves, and just kind of let their um, personalities kind of shine through to, because I think you'll like an artist a lot more if you kind of vibe with them as a person, and if you can kind of connect with them as a human being, you may find his music even better, and you might like it even more. So that's kind of been my goal with this show, is to make kind of like a futuristic, innovative radio show that's on demand, that you can listen to anytime, and that when a song comes up during the show, you can save it right to your playlist if you like it. And that streaming revenue, that's when a song plays on my show, and that streaming revenue is going right to the artist. It's not going to me. So the artists are directly benefiting from actually having the music on the show. So I think it's a format it's taking a while to kind of get popular. I know Amazon has their own version now. It's called AMP. Spotify's had it again for like 2 years now. So I really see, the radio industry kind of dying down and stuff like this becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, to your point about it being so similar to, it's almost like analog radio in a lot of ways, going back to the morning show you'd listen to on the way to school or on your commute or whatever. And to your point, I feel like it'll probably be a longer ramp up for something like this to gain traction and kind of mass culture. But I mean, I feel like the format is so digestible in a lot of ways. And to your point about creating and uncovering new music is really interesting. And I guess to that point, are you going out and sourcing these new artists? Are these just songs that you're coming across? Hey, I think this is pretty cool, I want to get this artist on, or plug this song on the show, or what's that process like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of 50-50, where I'll always do a lot of deep dives into Spotify, and I'm not kind of relying on editorial playlists, because I think those are kind of heavily biased as to who gets on those. But I will use a lot of the algorithms within Spotify. I like the radio feature, for instance. Like you can create a radio station based on any song you like, and it'll spit out 50 songs that are similar. Um, and I kind of just go in deep dives that way, and I'll find artists that I'd never heard of before. And if I like a song, I'll dive in and listen to their catalog and do a little research on who the artist is. And to be honest, it's a lot of curating, and for every like 200 songs I'll listen to, there'll maybe be one or two that I like. So it's definitely like a pretty intensive process, but through that process, I can actually find a lot of artists that I think most people regularly wouldn't find. So that's kind of the whole purpose of the show, is to kind of find those artists that most people maybe haven't caught on to yet. And that those, artists that aren't getting on large editorial playlists that could use more exposure. And then the other end of it is just, I'm kind of in this music community anyways. I mean, especially being in Nashville now for 8 months, just being here as little as 8 months. there's a lot of musicians that are moving here that aren't country musicians. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a whole handful of them, and some of them have, come over to the studio and done interviews in person. And some artists that I've kind of just found rummaging through Spotify, I've done some remote interviews with that I've been really proud of and really psyched about as well.
I mean, it's like I said, it's super unique, and I'm excited for folks to be able to check it out if they haven't already. To that end, I know you guys mentioned or talked about this on the last YNK episode, but would love, I mean, because it's changing so much, would love your perspectives, or at least up-to-date perspectives on the whole AI music situation. The first thing that I'd want to tackle, I'm sure you've used the Spotify DJ function.
I've seen it, but I haven't actually dove in and used it yet. Can you give me like a little background as to how it works?
Yeah, so it's pretty unique. You basically click this button, and it's a large language model, artificial intelligence guy named X, or DJ named X, that talks you through, saying like, hey, like, welcome, hope you're having a good Thursday or Wednesday so far. To start off, I have tunes I used to listen to in summer of 2015, and it spits out songs and plays like 3 of them. And then after those, that shuts off. In the similar format to the morning show, it'll say, hope you enjoy those. Now we have Mike coming up next for you, and plays your top played songs by your favorite artist, or it's some different blend. But it's a pretty unique tool. It's not perfect yet by any stretch of the imagination, but all that's to say the technology is getting pretty crazy. And so I know, like I said, you guys talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Would love any updated perspectives on how you're seeing that play out, even on the ground floor of Nashville. Are folks talking about this, and how AI is really just rampaging through the narrative in the music industry and just about any other?
No one's really I wouldn't say the industry is talking about it. But I know that, guys like Mike and myself are like really special. I mean, again, got to give credit to Mike, because Mike always has his ear to the ground, and he's always the first one to be throwing links my way, and videos that he sees. He's like, look what's happening. Look what's happening. Look what's happening. So I kind of get a lot of, this information from him, and he's super tapped into anything that's kind of new. So I've really only been hearing about AI in music, not too much. Probably about 7 or 8 months ago, maybe, starting then. And some of the first things I started hearing was like, these companies are developing where you can just type in like a genre of a song, and like what key you want it in, and you can mix different genres, and it'll just spit out an instrumental for you. And it kind of, that will in essence kind of like replace producers in a way. Like musicians won't have to like hit up producers to get beats and pay them out or whatever. They can just go into this algorithmic website and click a button and say like, I want a song that's this long, that is like half hip hop, half pop, and it can be in this key, and it'll spit out 10 variations of that. And they pick the one they like, and they make a song off of it. I mean, that's where the industry's headed. And at first I'm like, fuck that. Like the artistry is kind of dying, but at the same time, and the same thing's happening for music too. I mean, fuck, they're auto generating people's voices now. It's already happening. Right. I mean, Joe Rogan is coming out with AI podcast where it's just him and a guest, and it's auto generating them talking to each other. And they never had that conversation. It's just, and they're like full-fledged conversations that are like very coherent.
Yeah. They sound pretty legit too.
Sound pretty fucking legit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I heard I mean, I've been joking about it, but like I saw a post the other day of someone who did an AI version of Frank Sinatra singing Lil Jon from the window to the wall. And
yeah.
And it's Frank Sinatra and Frank Sinatra's legit voice over an instrumental that sounds like a Frank Sinatra song, singing like from the window to the wall to the sweat drop down my balls. And I'm like, okay, maybe like AI is not all that bad if I can hear Frank Sinatra singing Lil Jon. I mean, that's pretty fucking cool. But yeah, I mean, the industry's headed where like all of this stuff is going to be automated, and people like you or I who, aren't necessarily musicians can say like, hey, I want a Mike song featuring Drake, for example, and it'll just spit out a Mike Drake song. And what the industry has to figure out is how, artists are going to get compensated for all these AI generated songs. That's going to be very interesting. And I think about it all the time, and it's kind of uncertain as to how it's all going to pan out, but I'm hoping that there's always going to be a space for true artistry, and people are always going to resonate with what's real. And it's going to be very, very obvious to tell what's genuine and what's being created, like actually, versus what's being fabricated through AI. So we'll see what happens, but I'm kind of split on it at the moment. I don't really know how I feel about it.
I'm in the same, but I feel like there's a chance that in 10, 30, 50 years, we're going to sound like a bunch of old geezers saying, oh, this isn't the original artist, or this isn't their original voice singing this. It's not the real stuff. And the 20, 30-year-olds at the time will be yelling at us like the boomers we will be at that time.
Yep.
But look, you've been so generous with your time. In wrapping here, I'd love to just understand, I mean, you have so many irons in the fire, so many different things going on. What do you have in store for the rest of the year? I know a little bit of a loaded question, but anything you're shooting for, any goals or milestones you're striving towards as we kind of round out the spring of 23 into summer, and what you're looking forward to for the rest of the year and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, the things that I'm like focusing on for myself, the morning power hour is just kind of like an ongoing passion project that I don't really have any sights on, the outcome or what's going to become of it. I kind of just enjoy doing it. And I think it's actually doing good for the music community. So I actually enjoy doing it. So I'm not really wrapped up on the results of that, but I'm going to continue doing that. I shot my first feature film back in 2018, and I've kind of on and off been working on my second film. So I'm hoping to wrap up the writing of that this year and hopefully get it into production sometime next year. And then, yeah, working on a very exciting project of just kind of like being of service to independent musicians. I think that the industry for music, it's headed the independent route. And if you look at kind of the metrics, independent musicians are taking more and more market share every year compared to label artists. So I'm kind of more into the business of being of service to independent artists and kind of like turning each independent artist into their own business, kind of the same way Mike is doing for himself. I think any artist has the potential to do the same. So I'm kind of in a position where I can be of service to musicians of helping them kind of do the same thing. So that's kind of like my purpose in a way of how I see, what I'll be doing down the line for years to come. So that's kind of where my head's at.
That's awesome. And I know how important touring is for you, and being on the, or was, I guess, and being on the road for you. Now that you have your home base in Nashville, are you missing the touring life at all? Are you excited to get back on the road, or what's your thought process like around that right now?
Man, touring's a cruel mistress, man. It's a cruel mistress. And again, we talked about this on the YNK podcast recently, where we're starting to appreciate things differently on the road. Where if you asked us 10 years ago, we'd be like, yeah, like we can party every night and drink however much booze we want and people will love us. And, it's all chill and we get to hang with the fans and it's a party every night. And, we're blessed. We get to just party all the time. Whereas now it's like, there's just so much gratitude for like, we've been doing it this long, and the fans, like the Steves, they're like literally the most awesome people in the entire, like what a fucking wonderful community it's generated over the years. And now that's like, we look at it with such a scope of gratitude, because you go out every night and you see, these thousands of people every night in the crowd that are spending their hard-earned money and spending their time with us and supporting the music and what we do. Now it's not about like the party and like having a good time selfishly. It's about like, man, like we get to connect with all these people that are supporting us, and we just get to like do what we love every day. And we're just so grateful to be doing it. And not only that, but doing it as a friend group and, doing it for as long as we've been doing, and just the loyalty of all of us kind of sticking together and doing it. That's a really special thing too. But to add to the touring stuff, I mean, it's, there's an age limit to it as well. I'm 35, and it definitely takes a toll on me, especially last year. I mean, I was in the trenches pretty hard for a wide range of reasons, but when you're in the trenches and you're on the road and you're just getting a little sleep and you're working your butt off every night, it's as a 35-year-old, it's a lot more challenging than as a 25-year-old. So I think we're kind of changing the way we tour in general going forward. I'm not too sure, but I don't think we're going to be doing the 40 shows back to back anymore. I think it's going to be a little more spaced out going forward.
Well, I'm excited to see how you guys recreate and continue to innovate in the space. I'm so appreciative to be able to at least watch from the sidelines and see how you guys are tackling these changes, and so appreciative of your time, and hopefully we can reconnect again soon.
Yeah, dude, seriously, have me on anytime. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me to come on. And yeah, I can't wait to check it out.
Awesome. Thanks, John.